Right now on Tech Radio, why is Europe quietly dumping Windows?
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week we bring you the latest in tech chat from Ireland and across the world. This week, Niall Kitson is away, so we're going to be looking at some of the biggest tech stories and issues of the year so far with Jason Walsh, who always brings a refreshing and considered view to our podcast. So let's get ready to chat about space, the EU dumping Windows, and politicians being nasty to kids.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty Rhodes. Jason, great to have you back on the podcast, and thanks for making time for us this year. Just kind of looking back on some of the stories that you've been covering at techcentral.ie. I think maybe the biggest tech story of the year is SpaceX. Would you agree, or would you go for one of the other things we're chatting about today?
No, I mean, I certainly think it's probably one of the biggest stories of the year in general. Thanks for having me on, by the way, Dusty. Yeah, not a company I'm massively a fan of, and I do a lot of kind of shenanigans around the shares and indeed the composition of the company, which was sort of recently glued just before the flotation of the stock market. It was glued to several other companies of Elon Musk's. So yeah, you know, we could talk about that, but yeah, I mean, it's whether you like SpaceX or not, whether you think it's a viable kind of extraordinary $1 trillion company that the market seems to think it is right now, or thought so until yesterday. There's no denying the fact that it is a big launch onto the stock market. It's a huge, important company. It has, Musk himself has a lot of contacts with the US government, with other governments. And, SpaceX is fundamentally, I suppose, it's a launch company, although that's not where it gets its money. So again, it's government contracts. But yeah, huge story, huge.
There's one thing that worries me about SpaceX, all right? And I wonder if you agree or if you've got a different point of view, okay? SpaceX is made up of three companies, okay? So you have their space launch vehicle business, all right, which is functioning business. You have got
Starlink, yeah.
Starlink, which is a functioning business and a profitable business and doing very well. And then you've got the AI side of the business, okay, which is not working well. They've going back to basics, and they're going to start rewriting the thing from the ground up. And it's that AI side of the business that is like the projected 80% value of what SpaceX will be in X amount of years. It sounds to me, and I'm not a financial guy, right? But basically you're cobbling together three completely different businesses, and the biggest one is the one that hasn't even started.
Yeah, worse than that, it's four businesses actually, because just before XAI was merged into SpaceX, XAI bought X, formerly Twitter. Yeah. So, that was just a way of getting that off the books and getting rid of it, basically, But yes, I mean, that is fundamentally, you've identified the problem. So just to break it down for anyone who doesn't really care about finance or think about these things, in business, there's a thing called the conglomerate discount. So basically, these kind of conglomerates where one business buys another and buys another and buys another and becomes large and unwieldy. Those were very popular in the kind of mid-20th century. But generally, the shares for those kind of companies traded about 10 or 20% below the asset value of everything they owned. There was always a bit of a discount called the conglomerate discount, because the markets go, well, how am I supposed to understand what your company does when it sells vacuum cleaners and toilet roll? What do vacuum cleaners have to do with toilet roll? SpaceX has not seen a similar conglomerate discount, but it really should, because let's look at those revenue streams. Right. Starlink is profitable. There's no question about that. It probably will continue to be profitable. It's going to face competition. The Germans have announced that they're going to get into the low Earth orbit satellite market. Eutelsat's trying to do it as well, although Eutelsat hasn't been doing very well. But yes, that's a profitable business. And it's not just rural broadband, although a lot of it is. It's also state contracts, military, aviation, maritime. Those are profitable but not very exciting businesses. The launch business, well, is that profitable? That's rent seeking from government, but you might argue whether or not that's a good thing. Maybe NASA doesn't want to do its own launches. Maybe there's an argument for SpaceX. So fine, okay, we have two businesses and they're both space related, so they can go into the same container. As you mentioned, AI. Why is this in there? they start talking about things like data centers in space, we can barely build them down here on Earth, and everyone's going mad about the amount of water and energy they're consuming. We're not building them on asteroids anytime soon. Can we just drop the kind of 1950s Campbellian science fiction of this, please?
Yeah.
AI, qua AI, is going to be valuable. I think everyone basically agrees on that. Even people like me who are skeptical about the current companies and about the overclaiming and the sort of the rise of the LLMs and all of that. Even critics like me say, yeah, fundamentally the technology is valuable. What we don't know is who's going to succeed, what exactly it's going to do, who it's going to have an impact on. And I mean, again, you might say, well, that's the investor's problem. And I would say, yeah, it is that, and none of us should really need to worry about it. But why it's a problem with SpaceX is that the valuation is so inflated that it just continues distorting the markets and therefore the economy. The same way the massive growth over the years in some of the other tech companies like Apple and Google and Meta and Amazon has done the same thing. It's concentrating a lot of other people's money around this company, which has a questionable future. I'm not saying it's going to collapse. I'm just saying it's not the simple home run that it's being priced as.
So, Jason, do you think that SpaceX is going to be this specific pin that bursts the AI bubble, or do you think it will be something else and then just SpaceX is not going to help?
I don't know, and I'm not going to go out on a limb on that and it's not just cowardice, I don't know what the pin will be, or even if there will be a pin that bursts a bubble in one dramatic pop. What we are seeing is that there are kind of strange things going on in the market. So it's not like everything has just risen and everyone's drunk on their profits, although there's a certain, or their capital gains. There's a certain amount of that, but we are seeing other sort of second and third order impacts of the AI boom. So who knows what's going to happen? But let me give you an example of some of those. Some of them are going to come up in other parts of the conversation. One is, first of all, GPUs. Gamers got very annoyed at this. The GPUs got really expensive because they're all going into data centers. More recently, we've seen the same thing again with RAM because Micron is pulling out of the consumer market. It's going to focus on data centers again, just get all the RAM into the data centers. That's pushing prices up even on simple things like iPhones, laptops, MacBook Neo, all of these products. So it is having a real effect on the real economy. This isn't just, strange things happening in the trading accounts of billionaires. Will AI burst at all? I don't know. There's a lot of spending going on. One interesting thing came out yesterday, which is that IBM, which has seen its share price, it just absolutely crashed a few days ago. Specifically, according to IBM anyway, because spend that would have been going on mainframe and mid-range maintenance, so basically the banks and insurance companies and governments and so on, are instead spending that money on AI because they're afraid that AI hardware is getting so expensive, you need to get the cash into it now. So they're holding off on investment in other core infrastructure in order to feed the AI monster. That suggests we have a bit more to run on the AI boom, but it also suggests it would make a crash even worse.
Here's my theory, Jason. I wonder what you think of it, right? I think if there was going to be a specific pin that would immediately burst the bubble, both of AI and geopolitics, I think it would be China finally saying, we're going into Taiwan.
If China goes into Taiwan, we've already seen major oil shocks with terrible but relatively minor war in Iran. It's obviously not minor for anyone that's impacted by it, but the scale of conflict we would see if China invaded, I genuinely would consider that an all bets are off moment. You could be looking at certainly regional, possibly global conflict. So yeah, I would like to think that's not going to happen, but yeah, who knows? Very, very, very scary time. And China, of course, is a major power in the world, in military terms, in diplomatic terms, manufacturing, technology, AI. So yeah, these are all very real considerations.
Moving on to one of the other big stories of the year, and that is Europe trying to be more independent technically, because so much of the world is reliant on American software and American tech companies. And we have a thing now called the European Technological Sovereignty Package. You've written about it. Can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, it's a policy initiative principally designed to reduce dependence on foreign technology, whether that's US or Chinese or anything else, right? Scale up cloud infrastructure, whatever AI gigafactories are. They keep talking about those. I don't know what that term means, right? That's part of the Cloud and AI Development Act, which is part of this. There's also the open source strategy, so promoting open source alternatives for both business and public sector administration. We've seen some small but quite significant moves on that in France with, Linux being installed at certain government offices, just at the operating system layer. There's a lot more talk about developing applications and keeping them open source. Some years ago, all French government, ministers and MPs were told to get off WhatsApp and they have to use messaging apps. Most of those are open source, like Olvid. There's a few of them around. And then they also have a strategic roadmap for energy digitalization, which doesn't make any sense to me as actually being relevant to technological sovereignty, but it might be relevant in sort of a wider sovereignty sense, because if the AI pitch is really going to work out, we're going to need all those extra data centers, and we simply can't build them because we don't have the infrastructure. So we need to get the smart grids up and running. We need to get the generation, the renewables up and running, and so on and so forth. So yeah, fundamentally, it's an admission, in my opinion, of the fact that since the 1980s, we have slowly let all of our technology companies wither on the vine. And let's not forget, okay, it's a totally different era now, I understand that, but these were not small companies. We tend to remember of kind of 8-bit computers that, some of us of a certain age and would have grown up with, the Sinclairs and so on and so forth. Those were very important. I don't want to dismiss them, but what we should really be talking about are the likes of Olivetti, Nixdorf, Siemens, Siemens is obviously still around. Perhaps on the consumer side, something like Philips in the Netherlands, Acorn in the UK, which eventually gave us ARM, which is a big success story, not EU, but certainly European. We used to have a significant IT and computing industry at every level, at every layer, except really semiconductors. We've never been terribly good at semiconductor design, ARM accepted, obviously. And of course, Intel has, completely grabbed the majority of the desktop market. But leaving that aside, we were good at operating systems. We were good at application software. We were good at SME stuff. We were good at supplying into large businesses. We let that all go. It all withered on the vine as we all standardized on fundamentally Microsoft Windows, but also, I suppose, to a certain extent on Linux.
Well, could it be a reason that there just wasn't the market in Europe at the time, whereas there was a market in the States? Maybe there isn't the same kind of appetite for investment in Europe as there is in the States, or the same amount of money and stuff. So my point being, right, is that, and I remember, I'm one of those people of a certain age, thank you very much for being gentle, who remembers the BBC Micro. That's how I learned to code at school. And the funny thing is that a lot of those basics still apply today, however. But yeah, there was that industry. And then America kind of came along and went, hey, we can do it bigger and faster and harder and cheaper and da-da and all that. So we left them to it, right? I think today what we're seeing is the Americans now are facing a threat from China, because China is watching what the Americans are doing and copying it and doing it at a factory level and bringing the cost way down. Do you think that's a consideration for the world?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, just looking at, when the period when Europe was sort of completely overtaken by the United States, I would probably date that to the late 80s, early 90s. But it really fundamentally, the process started happening in the early 80s with the release of the IBM PC, and then later with PC clones and so on and so forth. Listen, America did it better than us. On the whole, let's just be honest about that. Obviously, you go back to the DOS days. DOS was not a great operating system. But yeah, the IBM PC, intentionally or not, was a very good idea. The Macintosh was a great idea. A lot of the American software was a great idea. And as you say, they had the investment, the venture capital, the funding. So yes, it's natural that they overtook us. And as a result, it's not surprising that we withdrew from it. But strategically, I think it was a mistake. I think that any region, if it has political ambitions, and clearly Europe does have political ambitions as a bloc, needs to be in control to a certain extent of something that is becoming, or in my opinion has at this stage become, totally fundamental to society. I mean, computing power at this point is fundamentally not much more generic than something like electricity or water. It's just something you need in society. Consequently, I think you don't want someone else controlling it completely.
Yeah. I think you're right. And it goes back to what you were saying. It's kind of like, the AI, everybody's agreed. Even the people who don't like it are agreed. It's here. It ain't going away. It's going to be part of society. It was the same, whatever, 20, 30 years ago when the internet first came along. It was all a big thing at the time. But it's you need electricity, you need water, and you need Wi-Fi connection. They're the three basics in a house at the moment. But anyway, interesting how Europe is starting to think. Last story that has been making waves this year, and just to get your opinion on it, is the whole social media ban for kids.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's the kind of thing in the past I would have been up in arms about, because I would have said, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if a proposal like this had been made, I would have said, you are making a political response to a technical problem. You should solve a technical problem with a technical solution and solve political problems with political solutions, right? I would say you're mixing things up. Stop this. And I would have said free speech, which I still believe in. I would have said all these things. But here's the thing. And I also would have said it won't work. And I would still say that a social media ban probably won't work. Kids know how to get around things. Some of them do anyway. But why have I changed my mind? Why do I, if not support it, understand it, accept it, just go, yeah, well, I expect that? Because the corrosive impact of social media is so enormous. It's undeniable at this point. It's corrosive to us individually as human beings, and we know it about ourselves without even talking about society or children or the impact on politics. Just we know that the doom scroll is bad for our mental health. It's bad for our productivity. It's just bad for everything. We don't know how to manage social media, which is a relatively new technology. Really, seriously, like in evolutionary terms, it's comically new. What do we do with the fact that, we're getting pounded by these firms? Increasingly, it's obvious that they are sort of manipulating our cognition on purpose to get more clicks, to get more revenue, build up the ads. If you think about something really banal like the advertising market back in the day, television ads, the big campaigns, I want to teach the world to sing, the future's bright, the future's orange, all of these famous slogans. When's the last time you saw a TV ad on that scale? Now, you might still see billboards, but TV ads, and TV ads still exist, but they don't have the cultural heft that they used to, because people are consuming content online. Where are they consuming it online? They're consuming it on social media. What is the mechanism on social media for getting people to consume your advert? Outrage. So social media creates outrage and division. Whether or not it's done maliciously or malignly doesn't really matter. It feeds off it, and therefore we need to sort of consider the social and psychological impacts of how social media operates. Therefore, these bans, while they are kind of clumping and heavy-handed and probably won't work, I can completely understand them, and really something has to be done.
I got Keir Starmer when he was talking about the social media ban that they're bringing in the UK, and they were saying, yeah, but kind of you liken it to smoking, but kids still smoke, or drinking and kids still drink. And it's true. Everywhere, kids will always find a way around. They will be able to smoke and they will be able to drink and stuff, but it doesn't, this is what Keir Starmer said, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a ban in place.
Yeah, and I mean, that seems a really banal and obvious point. I don't know why that has been so difficult to get across.
Yeah. Do you know, I think you've made just a really good point now today that I hadn't considered, all right? And it's that we know social media is bad for us. We, like everybody who sits there in private moment, flicking through TikTok, knows I shouldn't be doing this, but what the heck, I'm going to do it anyway. All right? It's like smoking. It's like, kind of putting too much sugar into your food, or eating too much chocolate or too much sweet. I shouldn't really be doing this, but hey, I'm going to do it anyway. Know, it's like me with wine. It's like I shouldn't be having an entire bottle, but half of it's going to sit in the fridge and not be finished. I might as well have it.
The thing about social media that has struck me, I've gone to extreme lengths to reduce my usage. Yeah. Helped along significantly by the massive amount of AI slop that has made it not even worth looking at.
Oh, stop. Yeah, true.
Like YouTube in particular, frankly, has been ruined. But, even I am failing. I'm still wasting time reading. I'm back where I was in 2006 or 2012. I'm constantly refreshing newspaper front pages again, pointlessly. There's a real, physician heal thyself thing going on here. We all really need to learn how to control our decision-making processes around things like social media. It really is quite an assault.
There was a fact that came out during the week about asking people, do you think social media is good for mental health? and only 30% of people said that they thought it was good for mental health.
In defense of social media, the one thing even obviously technologies like that, anything social is fundamentally about people. There is a question about how people behave when they're anonymous, or how they behave when they feel like they're anonymous, or how they behave when they're behind a keyboard in general. But let's not throw the baby out completely with the bathwater. I remember some great moments on social media of, simple things. I got people to help me with my car once when my battery went flat, or you could talk about the great things, the ability to talk about, niche topics across the world. You could, if you were interested in something, obscure form of music or a craft or something, you could build a community around those. Those are not things that we should dismiss lightly, but we do need to talk about the other side, because if you're going to talk about the positive side of social media and the internet and communication, computer-mediated communication, as we used to call it in general, you can go back to the 90s and you can have the kind of the Howard, Rheingold positive vision of, a global village community. That's fine. We shouldn't completely dismiss it, but we have decades now of data in, and we know that that's not the reality. The reality is much more complex, and there is a dark side and a downside, and we should be frank about it with ourselves.
Jason, I always love your point of view of what's happening in the world of tech and the world in general. Some great points there today about social media ban, the EU being more tech independent, and SpaceX, which we started off with. Thanks for your time and your views.
Thanks, Dusty.
Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland.
Can tech help with something as tedious as cutting the grass? Not only do Homebot Ireland have robots which do cut the grass, they also have robots to help with all kinds of tedious jobs around the house, and their tech is just getting better and better. Before his holiday, Niall Kitson had a chat with Homebot founder Clara Mulligan about their super simple robot solutions, localising the Irish voice for them, and how they are redefining home robotics.
Clara, I've found that no two founders' journeys are the same. I think yours is particularly interesting because you didn't have a natural affinity with robotics. So tell us a little bit about where you came from.
Yeah, I suppose my story is quite unusual, and it's not the traditional path through engineering or anything like that I've ended up in this role. I started many years ago as a teenager in car boot sales and employing friends as a teenager to do car boot sales with me and that kind of stuff. So I suppose from a very young age, I've had, an entrepreneurial spirit. But from there, my journey has taken me down many different avenues. So I had an equestrian business previously. So I had an equestrian centre, which moved into a service-based equestrian role also. I had bought a product from an Irish company, as they were the only ones selling clippers. It didn't work at the time as efficiently as it should have worked. And the company, when I contacted the company, they actually informed me they didn't have anybody that was specialised in the equine sector, and they asked would I come on as a consultant. So from there, I was back and forth, sourcing product, sourcing factory, dealing with supply chain. So I had a fair idea that I wanted to move into more of a product-based business, because previously all of mine were service-based, and especially then when my kids came along, the service-based, while it was fantastic, the hours that I would do, they were seasonal. So in the winter, I could be gone at 4 a.m. and might not be home till 10 or 11 p.m. that night. So it just really wasn't sustainable with a young family. And in the midst of all of that, I had bought a robot that I spent almost €1,000 on at the time, which, 6 years ago was a lot in this sector. And it didn't work great. So I just... all roads kind of collided and I seen an opening.
So it was kind of, you were sold on the concept of not the execution, and that's where sort of the product element came in.
Exactly. So the concept of it and the idea of it was fantastic, and the technology behind it was pretty good, but the execution of it from a practical day-to-day user's point of view just wasn't fully there. So I just seen an opportunity to put the end user's touch on it and transform it into something that was really, really, beneficial to people, to make lives a little bit easier at home.
So, in particular, then looking at lawnmowers are kind of I don't want to call it a saturated market, but there are a few competitors out there. So, what did you feel you could add as a competitor, as sort of somebody entering the market?
So at the time when we started looking at what solutions were available at the market, again, think back a few years, this sector moves really quickly. So when I started looking, I think it was about 6 years ago now, what we wanted from a robot lawnmower, it was my father-in-law had, a few different pieces within his lawn, and he also would have steps where he had to drag his lawnmower up. He also had elderly neighbours. Even though he was elderly, he was the person that did everybody's lawns. So we wanted one that he could pick up and bring from garden to garden and sit down and have a cup of tea, while the robot did it instead of him doing it. But it wasn't available, didn't exist. Even in his own garden with 3 separate sections, it was thousands that we were quoted for something that would do all 3 sections. So again, just not really feasible for the everyday end user. So while the market was saturated to a degree, it was saturated with very similar products. We brought something that was unique to the market, and it was an AI powered. So it was no wires, no GPS. It was the first of its kind in Ireland at the time, and it was received really well. So we were delighted with that.
Very often we talk about, marketing personas or the ideal customer. Traditionally with sort of robot appliances, you're thinking of the busy family. You had a very different experience by looking at somebody that was a bit older but still enjoyed sort of working with their hands, that kind of thing. Well, was that something of an aha moment that, okay, this is actually the person we're marketing to? We don't, the wider family will come in time, but for now, this is our guy.
Yeah, I mean, we had a few aha moments. That was one. Another, say, with the vacuum side of things, my childminder at the time, while she was a young woman, she had 4 kids. She had only recently learned to text a year previous. Because you remember, we are down in West Cork, and not everybody, obviously, I'm not generalising, but, it's a different culture than the middle of Dublin city centre. So again, it just threw a new perspective on it. Even to this day, we don't have fibre down here. We are currently working off dongle. So Wi-Fi issues, all of that kind of stuff. When you come out of the bigger cities, these are all real issues that people face. So while we were getting friends and neighbours and family to test our machines, it was real life situations where they were elderly or maybe not tech savvy or didn't have great reception, and they wanted it to work. They needed the same solution, but they needed it to be approached from a different angle. So that, it could work in their homes.
So tell us a little bit about the solution then, particularly on lawnmowers, because we started talking about that. So somebody gets one of your products. What's the setup like?
Well, we'll just take Buddy, for example. He is the AI one, so there's literally no setup. You just open the box, sit back, boil the kettle or whatever, grab a drink, sit out onto a deck chair and press go. That's it. It has a library of images basically in its brain, and that anything is grass is good, it'll continue to cut, and anything that's not grass, it'll stop and turn. And our kids have tested it thoroughly with Hot Wheels cars and tennis balls and you name it. They set up obstacle courses sometimes for it to watch it go around. So it really is as simple as just push and go.
Wow, and that requires a certain level of sensitivity as well. I mean, I imagine there was quite a bit of looking for that Goldilocks sort of balance of, okay, being able to recognize something or maybe accept that something just might be within normal bounds, you might say, of a clump of grass is perfectly fine. It doesn't mean that it's, a rabbit in hiding or something like that.
100%. I mean, really, color changes, texture changes. Say today obviously is beautiful weather at the moment. So the buttercups will be fully open, fully out. It is sensitive enough that it will stop at a buttercup and kind of go, not sure, come at it from a different angle, or maybe wait till later till the sun dies down and then go back. equally, we had a man in Wexford who was one of our original customers, and he had an immense amount of clover in his garden. There was practically no grass. It was just clover. So we had to retrain the robot at that point to accept that clover is grass and it could cut that and that it didn't have to turn away. So while, you know, the robot is brilliant, we're constantly updating it, constantly changing as people's gardens evolve, as we learn more about different types of grass. We're always doing updates.
Part of your appeal is, you know, it's an Irish company. People like supporting Irish companies, but you've also taken that localization to a different level in terms of voice commands.
Yeah. We put an Irish accent voice onto the robot, which, you know, I wanted to do just because it obviously is based here in Ireland and we do as much as we can from here. But we were really surprised actually with the feedback from it and with how popular that alone was. So we do intend to expand on that. It's looking like it might be for maybe Seachtain na Gaeilge next year, that we might run, you know, a bit of a competition and get some of Gaeilge onto the robot itself and maybe a few different accents, you know. So,
you know, having conquered the outdoors, we'll say, you've got a few indoor options as well. So tell us a little bit about, you know, your decision to expand within the bounds of the four walls.
Yeah, for us, the company was always going to be home robotics. So it wasn't necessarily just your lawnmower, but it's the brand that you can trust. So, you know, if you get your lawnmower from us, it generally tends to happen. About 60% of customers actually then come back and get their vacuum then afterwards. We're also looking to launch our window cleaner later on this year as well. So it's just to add practical solutions to the day-to-day. But our vacuum cleaners have been extremely popular. We launched them in September 24. They sold out straight away. We restocked and went live again in the end of October. And again, they sold out straight away. So it was a bit of a whirlwind beginning for the robot vacuums. Since then, sorry.
No, go on.
Since then, it's just continued to grow. We are now stocked in Euronics and Topline stores across the country. And it's brilliant to get the backing, brilliant to work with, you know, local suppliers as well.
And in getting support from those retailers, I imagine you thought of an online first strategy and then maybe going to retailers. But how have those conversations been?
Yeah, so we sold online through our own website. But one thing I noticed early on, bear in mind how we tested and all that kind of, you know, early day setup that we were doing, I did notice that the customer that we felt could benefit the most out of this weren't necessarily the ones that shopped online or weren't necessarily the ones that might spend, you know, €800-900 online comfortably. They were the people that more so needed to see the product, feel the product, speak to a human. That's, while we love robots, we really are centering humans at everything we do from an after sales point of view. But we began to do trade shows, the likes of the Ploughing Championships or the Ideal Home Show. And the uptake from customers was just insane at those shows. So it became evident very quickly that when people had the opportunity to see it working, they could throw, you know, Rice Krispies or Cheerios or whatever down onto our display table. They could pick it up, turn it upside down, ask one of the experts exactly how to use it. It became obvious very early on that retail really was the way forward for us.
And if somebody wants to have a look at your website and maybe make a purchase, where can they find you?
So our website is www.homebotsireland.ie. You'll find us there. Or equally, if you go on to Euronics or Topline's websites, you can search locally there as well.
And that was Clara Mulligan chatting with Niall Kitson. You can find out more about Clara and the robots at homebotsireland.ie.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. My thanks to Jason Walsh for jumping in and giving us a good review of the big stories of the year so far. Niall is back with us again next week, next Friday, with a brand new show. In the meantime, please do share our podcast with a friend. Just time to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify or YouTube. Until then, as always, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, and from Niall and from Jason Walsh, thanks for listening. Take care.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.